Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Another concert cancellation in Vancouver. Little Yachty's weekend show had to be cut short due to crowd safety concerns. What happens when a show is cut short? Does it sell audiences short? And when should you get a refund? We'll take your calls on that. Plus, the province announces legislation to fast-track foreign-trained professionals. We'll get reaction from an immigrant services group. And we hear about a Dia de los Muertos event in Vancouver and ask you, how did you celebrate Halloween growing up? What are your own childhood traditions? I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks for joining us on CBC Radio 1, live streaming as well on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC. You can watch us on YouTube at CBC Vancouver's page. Oh yes, rapper Little Yachty was forced to cancel his Vancouver show mid-concert on Saturday night after fans rushed the floor.
You know what I'm saying? We don't come to no Little Yachty show and just standing on seats. We got great. Hey, come down here. I'm telling you, come over. Come on.
After only a few songs, he told the crowd in the stands at UBC's Thunderbird Sports Center to join the crowd on the floor.
He's like, yeah, does everybody hit the mosh pit, like this heat of the moment. That's just kind of how it is. And everybody starts storming it. And like, yeah, everybody should start hopping the wall, because the wall was like a toddler could have hopped it. Like, it was really easy. Like, yeah, I could see why they canceled it, because, the tragedies in the past and all that, like you got to be careful of it, because if it went horribly wrong, like that's not a fun lawsuit, I'm guessing. So like, it makes sense they got canceled, but it also, like, when I was there, I didn't feel like I was in danger, like, at all. Like, it didn't seem like, I know people like broke some of the walls and stuff, but it didn't seem like it was like that bad. So everybody felt a bit like bummed out and disappointed.
That was Sebastian Stratford, who was at the concert. Now, security cut the rapper's mic, turned on the lights, and urged fans to return to their seats. When they didn't, arena staff and the concert promoter, Live Nation, deemed the safety risk too high for the show to continue. Now, many turned to social media to express their disappointment and demanding refunds. Now, we have reached out to Live Nation about that possibility of refunds, and we have not heard back. And we've just heard from that one disappointed fan from Little Yachty's concert canceled short on Saturday night, just after 5 songs. And social media has been flooded with fan reactions to the cancellation. But it's not the first time concerts have been canceled or postponed in Vancouver over these recent months. As you know, in August, one of Drake's 2 nights had to be rescheduled at the last minute, and this was due to an equipment malfunction. And that left fans disappointed, with some unable to change the day as they had to fly back home. They had traveled to Vancouver to watch Drake's concert. Last week, Pink had to cancel her Vancouver dates as well due to illness and will be rescheduling. But the Little Yachty concert had a fan element to it, with the fans refusing to go back to their seats, some fans anyway, and causing that safety concern for the promoter and the venue. Well, we want to hear from you. What happens when a show is cut short, whether it's a music show or other entertainment? Does it sell audiences short? And when do audiences deserve a refund? How do you feel about going to live entertainment these days? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email to bctoday@cbc.ca. For more on this, we have reached Kelsey Barnes, and we're reaching her in London in the UK. And Kelsey is a music journalist. Hi, Kelsey.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for joining us again on the program. We had you on talking about the Taylor Swift concert a few weeks back. So let's talk about this Little Yachty concert. What was your take on what happened?
It's just a shame. It's a shame for all the fans who didn't hop onto the floor. When you have an artist that is kind of like at that profile and they're encouraging fans to hop on the floor, obviously they're going to take advantage of that. So it is a shame for those that didn't take advantage of that. But yeah.
What do you think? And you don't know what was going on in his mind when he said that, but for an artist like him, perhaps he's getting really big, perhaps new to performing in Vancouver and whatnot. What might be going through their mind when they, I guess, get in that moment? And I guess he was just caught up.
I don't want to speak to,
No, of
you know,
course not. Yeah.
but there is a bit of, I feel like there is a bit of ego there, a bit of idol worship where, he knows that if he says jump, they're all going to jump.
Right.
If he get on the floor, they're all going to get on the floor.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of environment. I feel like a lot of fans would probably do that for their favorite artists. Definitely idol worship, I would say, for sure.
And they might think that was okay then, right? That they have the go ahead to do that, and since the artist themselves is encouraging them to do so. And I remember when we talked last time as well, we talked about that kind of changing culture at concerts where people seem to want to get more involved or more connected and have more access to the performer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've noticed especially a lot with Gen Z, and they kind of have an obsession with being at the barricade, which is the very, very front by the stage. And they camp out for hours. Like in Toronto, there was an issue for a Boy Genius concert where they camped out for hours and everybody was fainting by the time they actually went on. So which caused the artist to pause the show, and everybody has to, it's just a shame, really, because people pay tons and tons of money to go to these concerts, and constantly getting interrupted, or in this case, getting canceled completely.
Right. And what happened with the Boy Genius concert then? Did people get a refund or?
No, they basically just pull people out of the crowd, give them some water, and I'm not sure if they just go home after, if they get a medical check, or if they just get back into the crowd. It is basically a case by case basis. Yeah, this little Yachty is very interesting, because how do you determine who gets a refund in this situation? Because it was the artist kind of encouraging everybody on.
5 songs in and the concert is cut short. What do you think is the onus on promoters or even the venues when it comes to this? It sounds like they made the decision they had to make due to those safety concerns. But is there perhaps, could they have given more time back for fans to get in their seats, or maybe raise the lights and then resume afterwards when things calm down? Or are there ways around just canceling it altogether?
I do think they did the right thing in the sense that they did try one time for everybody to get back in their seats, and everybody just did it again. At the end of the day, they need to make sure nobody dies in these situations. It makes me think of the Travis Scott Astroworld situation where people were pushing up to the front of the crowd where people died. Yeah. Live Nation, sorry, I forget the venue that this concert was at.
The Thunderbird Stadium,
they don't want people dying. It's just not worth it. Like them taking a loss or Lil Yachty taking a loss is not worth it for, even one person to die in this situation. And
you're right to bring up that example. I think that's what the concert goer we had clip was also referring to in terms of how serious it could be if the crowd does start to get crushed, and those kinds of safety concerns. And so we're taking calls from our listeners as well. What happens when a show is cut short, whether it's a concert or other kind of show? How do you feel about that? And when do audiences deserve refunds, do you think? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. Catherine is joining us from Victoria. Hi, Catherine.
Hi there.
Hi. Do you know someone who went to the show?
Yes, my son went to the show. He's a 20-year-old UBC student, and he lives for these concerts.
Yeah.
I have a mother's perspective in that every time he goes to a show, I'm always concerned, and I wait for his call at the end of the night to know that he's home safely or a text. But in this instance, I do feel that the onus should be on the promoter, with Lil Yachty having called people down to the floor. My son indicated that it was a handful of quote unquote young people, teenagers that were kind of out of control and weren't listening. And, there were lots of people that had gone back to their seats and were waiting for things to start up again. and it was really disappointing, and it's a hit to their pocketbook. I'm of course just grateful that everything was done safely, and I would encourage them to do that every time if that safety is an issue. But given that the artist called them down, I think the onus is on them to refund these kids.
What have you heard from your son about any kind of ticket refund?
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
They haven't heard anything at all. And he's not holding out a lot of hope for it. But he had tickets to other concerts this year that have been canceled. And he said it gives them all pause, they want to go. This is a fun thing to go see live music, live shows. But if this is always going to be the risk that they're going to spend their money that they don't have a lot of, especially as students,
Absolutely,
then it might not be in their best interest to buy tickets.
Absolutely. Do you know how many concerts he's planned to go to that have been canceled?
I think I believe this is the third or fourth that has been canceled. He and a friend had tickets in was it the start in September to go actually across the border to see a show, and I'm brutal because I can't remember.
Yeah, sure.
It was little somebody, I'm sure.
Maybe someone, yeah.
yeah. But that had been canceled, and again, as a parent, and given the Travis Scott situation, I'm always on the side of caution and safety.
Yeah.
But they need to put better protocols in place so that something like that doesn't happen again, I think.
Fair enough. Catherine, really good to hear from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I relate to that too. My son had a friend who was at the Little Yachty show and experienced it, but just beyond being disappointed, didn't really have all that much of a strong reaction. We are taking your calls on this as well. Asking you what you think when concerts are cut short. As she mentioned, there are 3 or 4 when it comes to her son trying to go to see a live show. What happens, and who do you think? Where do you think the onus lies? When do you think an audience should get a refund? What do you think of that, Kelsey? Safety first, right?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, safety is most important. It's just not worth it for artists, for promoters, for fans themselves. Like nobody buys a concert ticket with the thinking of like, oh, I might die in this. Like that's not anybody's goal whatsoever. I do empathize a lot with people getting so excited for concerts and having them be canceled. I know in Toronto there's been tons. SZA had to cancel I think half an hour before she was meant to go on stage, or before they were opening doors. The Weekend with that whole Rogers outage that was canceled.
And
maybe
Drake here,
a little bit of a curse.
Yeah, I remember that when the Rogers outage all across the country, and the Weekend concert that people basically learned as they were going. Yeah. Same here with Drake as well. I would have loved to go see SZA. I would have been disappointed by that. Do you think that? Does it seem to be getting more frequent then in your mind? And as you were talking about before, there's this pent up demand to go to a live show.
Mm-hmm. Weirdly, I feel like there's been a weird shift post pandemic. It's like people forgot etiquette. And I don't mean that to be offensive in any way, but again, with people lining up for concerts for hours and hours, or before, sometimes I know for Harry Styles in Toronto, people tried camping out 2 days before, which is okay if you're staying hydrated and eating, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. I do think post-pandemic, there's been an interesting shift in just concert etiquette and what is correct to do at a concert, aka not swarming a pit or a stage or any of that. I don't know if there's any sort of science or anybody's done any research about that, but it does feel like post-pandemic there has been a little bit of a change for sure.
There. Yeah, let's take a call now from Steve in Victoria, talking about concerts getting cut short and when audiences should get a refund. And our number again, 1-800-825-5950. Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for calling in.
Hey, Michelle. How's it going?
Really well. And were you at the show at all? Did you come in from Victoria?
Absolutely not.
Okay. And what do you think of what the decision was to just cut it short?
The this goes deeper. So I'm going to probably complain a bit about the whole process of Ticketmaster / Live Nation. But, ultimately the customer who pays should see a show. Obviously, I understand safety very, very well. But at the same time, if a concert is cut short, my personal opinion is that all customers who attended, no matter what happens, should receive a refund. And I'll tell you why. And as I said, safety is paramount. But when you have an organization such as LiveMaster / Ticketmaster, who made $16.9 billion up until June 2023, last year alone, that's ridiculous. And it's ridiculous on so many fronts and levels that there was no system in place, that there was no system in place for government to intercede. There's no body that can take a different approach on top of this, so the consumer is out left hanging. And this is why that kind of money, when you're talking that kind of money, and I've see hundreds of concerts. I just got back from Indio, California for Power Trip, and 2 tickets in VIP cost me close to $5,000 American.
Oh my goodness. And that's not even including the travel.
That's not including the travel. Wow. So it's obviously separate from Live Nation and whatnot, but these are the prices that are being commanded by bands today, and it's getting ludicrous. So I'm thinking that there needs to be some kind of governing body that needs to have some oversight on this, where people are going to concerts, expect to see their favorite entertainer, and they don't. They immediately get it, whatever the rationale behind it, immediately get some kind of refund. And I know they do this, their ticket's valid till, it's rescheduled, those kind of things, which is kind of fair, but that doesn't help people who fly in from out of town. No. Hotels, gas, ferries, planes, whatever it might be. There needs to be something that just doesn't leave the consumer hanging dry. I mean, when you're an organization that makes $16 billion a year, and this is why we see these, 1970s bands, 60s bands, Frankie Valli's, they're still out there touring because they know they're going to make millions because people are paying anything and everything for live music.
And would you say, Steve, then that, for a show that was part way through, should it be a partial refund or full?
I say a full refund. The experience is completely ruined as a person who goes. I would expect a complete refund, not because I'm money hungry, because I'm a paying customer. The customer is always right. I want my full experience.
All right. Steve, thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing from you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Steve in Victoria. Tim is up next in Vancouver. Hi, Tim. What do you want to say about the little Yachty concert getting cut short and any concert cancellation?
Hi. So, like a lot of people, I first heard about this on CBC this morning. I actually work in the music industry. I'm a technician. I'm a roadie, and I travel internationally with a lot of different bands, doing a lot of different kinds of things. And I went to the artist's Instagram page, where he posted a video from several different camera angles of what happened at the show last night. And as someone who's worked in crowd management, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
There's a separate barricade partway across the floor to prevent a crowd crush, and he calls people down to the floor and increases the density hugely. When you're dealing with people in a crowded space like that, you have targets for the density per square meter of bodies, because at a certain point, when you get around above 4 people per square meter, they stop being people, and the crowd will turn into a liquid. And what he did by calling all those people down, created a massively unsafe situation. Wow. So when the venue stopped the show and they asked people to go back, that was great. That was exactly the right thing to do. When everybody came down again the second time, you have to stop the event. The artist has created a massively unsafe place. This is how people died at Astroworld. This is how people have died at concerts or at festivals in Europe in the past. And the live music industry has gotten a lot better at managing these kind of things. But like in this case, yeah, everyone gets a refund. There was no force majeure. This wasn't a power failure. This wasn't weather. This wasn't any kind of outside force. The artist who was performing the show deliberately created an environment that was absolutely untenably unsafe. So they should be giving everybody that attended that show their money back.
Have you seen more of these situations? Have you been in a situation like this, Tim?
I've been fortunate to never be involved in a full crowd crush. I mean, I'm actually somebody that doesn't really enjoy crowds, which is kind of a funny thing because, you know, this past summer I was working on some shows where we were playing in stadiums and we had, you know, 50 to 60,000 people in the venue. But when you manage your crowd protocols and when you have people who are assigned specifically to spot and count and to manage entry and exit, like, you can manage huge crowds of people very safely. And in this case, they made an attempt to do that, and the artist overrode it completely.
Well, it's fascinating to hear from you, Tim. I'm so glad you called. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
Yeah, that's to you. Take care, Tim in Vancouver. A quick final word to you, Kelsey Barnes. When you hear that, you know, those kinds of issues that roadies face, and he described very in detailed manner what the rules are, what the density is that's required. And as you say, things, the crowd appetite seems to have changed. What is there kind of oversight, any kind of oversight that we can look at perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, it must be, I never actually think of it from like the roadie perspective,
Yeah.
which is probably bad of me. But yeah, I mean, they're seeing something, you know, go completely AWOL. They're seeing, you know, chaos for something that should be a very, very like rigorous setup. So it's horrifying for them. And I'm sure he has tons and tons of stories of just kind of how concerts were pre-pandemic and post-pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very fascinating. I'm glad he called because I learned stuff.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you're observing that kind of shift, you know, as you say, since the pandemic, it seems to have happened. Really good to have you back. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Take care. Kelsey Barnes, pop culture journalist, and she joined us from the UK. 27 minutes past 12 o'clock now, past 1 o'clock in the Mountain Time Zone. As you heard in the news, the BC government is introducing new legislation to fast-track skilled professionals from outside Canada. And the province says the International Credentials Recognition Act will eliminate what it calls the catch-22 of requiring Canadian experience before being accredited in Canada. Here's Premier David Eby.
Specifically, this new law, if it passes, will require regulatory bodies to remove unfair barriers for 29 different professions: early childhood educators, social workers, paramedics, veterinarians, lawyers, teachers, scientists, engineers, architects, natural resources professionals, experts in technology. There are so many British Columbians that are going to benefit from this initiative, and so many new arrivals to our province that are going to be able to apply their skills and talents to build the kind of province we all deserve.
Well, joining us now is David Lee, Mosaic's Director of Employment, Language, and Social Enterprise. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
Thank you for joining us, David. What difference will this kind of legislation make?
I think we really appreciate what this legislation will do for a sustained period of time. So by introducing it as a piece of legislation, it's going to provide ongoing oversight on the type of opportunities that are provided to people who might come with international credentials.
For those sectors that he was talking about, what exactly gets in the way of getting credentialed?
There are multiple barriers that get in the way. I think it does start with the fact that for many employers, there's a lot of uncertainty around hiring folks that might have the international credentials. It takes a long time for people to achieve those credentials in the first place, which is a loss to the labor pool of potential staff joining employers. But then for employers themselves, there's an additional uncertainty around someone for whom it's taken a long time to get their credential recognized here in Canada. And that means potentially years where a person hasn't worked in the occupation they were trained for.
Right. What impact does it have on their life?
Well, we've heard a lot of stories within Mosaic, and I know a lot of the other organizations supporting newcomers have heard these same stories where people are forced to make decisions of leaving the profession that they spent years in their home countries getting trained for and even working in those professions, and then coming to Canada, seeing the road ahead being a long and expensive road for them to work in the same occupation, making decisions not to pursue that occupation here.
Would they consider, when I first moved here, my parents, my dad had a law degree and had trouble getting any kind of work in that field, considered going back to the Philippines. Is that something that people are faced with?
I mean, we have heard that on an increasing basis, where people have indicated they've come to Canada with the hopes and dreams of pursuing a new life here in the occupation that they've spent years already working in, and then making the tough decision at times to go back. And certainly that doesn't help anyone. I think more so we look at it here in Canada. It's not only the individual stories, but also for our communities where we have a significant amount of gaps, where we need people to work in these fields, and we know that they have the professional training to do this work.
At the same time, how do you address, perhaps gaps around the different kinds of training, local experience and knowledge, and what that brings?
Well, I think that's a really great question, because it points to the fact that it is something that employers also need to consider. It's the part of many of the employment programs that have been supported by the government, so that people can connect to the employers and also have a path while they're waiting for their credentials to get recognized and confirmed, so they can work in the particular sector that they would like to pursue their employment in.
That oversight you were talking about.
Yes.
David, very good to have your early reaction to this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle.
David Lee is Mosaic's Director of Employment, Language, and Social Enterprise. It's 12:32, 1:32 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks so much for joining us. Coming up in our next half hour, we're getting closer to Halloween, so we'll start talking about Halloween traditions, asking you, what did you grow up doing to celebrate Halloween? We'll hear about an event to celebrate Dia de los Muertos this Thursday, and we're taking your calls. That's coming up after the CBC News Update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Homicide investigators have been called to the site of an explosion in Langley. Crews have now found a body inside an outbuilding after the explosion and fire yesterday. There are no details about the victim or a possible motive. Police say 5 students and 1 adult have been taken to hospital after a school bus rolled over this morning in central Alberta. Their injuries are not considered life-threatening. There were no fatalities. It happened near Didsbury, about 60 kilometers north of Calgary. And as we've been hearing on the show, the provincial government has introduced new legislation which it says will make it easier to attract foreign trained professionals. The province says it will eliminate what it calls the catch-22 of requiring Canadian experience before being accredited. If passed, the new legislation will come into effect next summer. And now the forecast on the north coast, mainly cloudy this afternoon with a high of 7. Highs around -7 with snow in some sections of the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a chance of flurries with a high of -1. Highs reaching 11 with some sunshine in the West Kootenay, a chance of showers in the East Kootenay. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, a high of 12 with a chance of showers and a bit of sunshine. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, a bit windy this afternoon with a mix of sun and cloud, and highs around 11. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Michelle with BC Today.
Thank you, Rob. I don't know if you know anyone who went to that Yachty concert.
I don't.
You
No.
don't.
No.
My son's friend went, and as I mentioned, he was disappointed. I, on the other hand, went to see the Taylor Swift concert movie.
Oh, the movie.
Yeah, this is the movie, and there's no Taylor Swift concert in
Right.
Vancouver to go to. But thankfully not one to be canceled either, so we got to see the whole thing.
And how was that?
People treated it like it was a concert. They were
Really?
singing along. Yes, I went with my daughter and her friend, singing at the top of their lungs. It was infectious, and they were out in front, dancing away. So it was like Taylor Swift was there.
A little less expensive,
A little
I assume.
less. That's right. Thankfully.
So that's nice, yeah.
Mom was happy about that. Thanks so much, Rob.
You bet.
Robert Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here. We're on CBC Radio 1, 88.1 FM in Metro Vancouver. Live streaming as well on our website, cbc.ca/BC, on YouTube at CBC Vancouver, and you can use the CBC Gem live streaming, or streaming service rather. It is 12:35 now. October 23rd, we are getting closer to Halloween. Just about a week away. I'm sure you're already seeing houses decked out in cobwebs and skeletons. Maybe you're putting together your own costume. Well, many of us grew up with different Halloween traditions. In a few moments, we'll be joined by Chef Francisco Higareda at Vancouver's Ophelia restaurant, where they are marking the Mexican tradition of Dia de los Muertos this week. We're asking you, what were your own Halloween traditions growing up? Have they changed? How do you share those traditions with your own children? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. Now, of course, when we think Halloween, we can think of people with the Irish heritage. And we were talking about this in our story meeting this morning. And our own story producer and show director, Alan Regan, was born and raised in Ireland. So we had a chat about his experience. Alan, when we were talking about this, I asked you, what do people do in Ireland for Halloween? And I thought, maybe that's not, you're asking someone who comes from where Halloween originated. Well, what do we know about its origins?
Well, it actually goes back thousands of years to when a Celtic festival called Samhain began in Ireland, because November 1st was the start of the new year in the Celtic calendar. So it was this transitional time between the old year and the new one, and it was thought that mortals and souls could mingle with each other at this particular time of year. So families wanted to welcome the so-called good souls into their homes, and so they would carve out faces in turnips and in potatoes and place lights inside them to illuminate them, and that was seen as a way of welcoming them to their homes.
And so that sounds familiar. It's I guess the pumpkins as we know them now. How did that all evolve?
Well, in the 1800s, about 1 million refugees fled starvation in Ireland, and so many of them arrived here in North America, and with that, of course, they brought their culture and traditions with them. And people saw that when they arrived here in North America, pumpkins were plentiful, and not only that, they were actually a lot easier to carve as well. So that was how the modern jack-o'-lantern came about.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes if you're surrounded by little kids, it may not be so easy because everybody's fighting for a front row. And so what about, for yourself, some other traditions that you can think of?
Well, certainly, trick-or-treating is certainly something that we did growing up as well. And that actually does have a Canadian connection, that particular tradition, because, the idea of mischief was something that Irish people brought across the Atlantic with them. But the phrase trick-or-treat, that originated in Alberta. In 1927 was the earliest use of it. It was a newspaper at the time. This is according to historian Nick Rogers at York University. Pranksters were going door to door demanding a trick or a treat from the doors that they knocked on.
Wow.
And that was how that tradition came. So it kind of put a bit of a Canadian flair on this Irish tradition that they brought over across the Atlantic with them.
And do we know where Smell My Feet came from? No.
No origin story for that, unfortunately.
For that one, okay. Mystery still. So for yourself, what was it like growing up in Ireland?
Well, certainly, all the culture and traditions that people associate with Halloween here was a big part of my childhood growing up. Certainly, some kids would dress up in big elaborate costumes every Halloween, but if you're in a pinch, just put a black plastic bag and just get a broom and call it good.
2 holes.
For sure. And we would always bob for apples and water and what have you on Halloween growing up. But you mentioned its origins in Ireland. I always think it's really funny around this time of year when people ask do you guys celebrate Halloween in Ireland? And it's or sometimes you'll see people saying no one celebrates it like people do in BC, and it's it is an Irish tradition. Obviously, people here are very welcome to celebrate it, but its origin is east of the Atlantic.
I took it on when I moved here from the Philippines, where we did none of the sort. No trick or treating. It was definitely more about the All Souls Day, All Saints Day. But I embraced it. It meant getting candy, so
it's fun.
Yeah, I was all into it. Alan, thanks so much.
Thanks, Michelle.
That's our show director, Alan Regan, who comes from the OG of trick-or-treating, Alberta. No, I'm kidding, Ireland. We're asking you, what were your own Halloween traditions growing up, and have they changed? How do you share those traditions with your own kids? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. If you'd like to email us, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. Now, this Thursday, Chef Francisco Higareda will pay homage to his Mexican heritage by hosting an event for Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. He's the executive chef at Ophelia Restaurant in Vancouver. And it's my pleasure to welcome Chef Francisco to our show. Hello.
Oh, hello. How are you?
Really well. Looking forward to this and being able to speak to you. And I see you have some samples here, which makes me even more excited. But tell us about, what you're celebrating this Thursday and how that relates to your own heritage.
So we are having this Thursday at Ophelia restaurant, the traditional Dia de los Muertos celebration.
Yeah.
I cook fine dining that day. It's the only day that I cook some fine dining in the restaurant. So we have a six course meal that day, and it's a celebration for what we do all the time in Mexico, right? Like celebrating the death. And you just told me that you are from Philippines, and we do something like very similar, right?
Yeah. Go and visit. Yeah, I grew up not knowing about costumes. I never dressed up in a costume, but we would go and visit cemeteries, bring food, and this would be on All Souls Day on the first, All Saints Day first, and All Souls Day on the second. So it was more somber in that way, but we also certainly, discussed things like ghosts, and there were those kinds of stories as well that we would share. What was it like for you growing up?
Yeah, it's very similar.
Yeah.
So the thing that we do in Mexico is try to venerate the death, right? Like try to remember that people in our past, like that those people that we love. And so something very traditional is bring food to the cemetery, right?
Yeah.
And
What kind of food?
So we have this traditional bread that we do, like this one that we have in here.
Let's put this up to the camera.
Yeah, that's the traditional bread for Dia de los Muertos. We call it pan de muerto.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So that's how we call it, and it's like a brioche bread with an intense flavor of orange, and we usually dip it in hot chocolate, right?
Yeah.
So I bring the traditional cups from Oaxaca to.
Those are beautiful. I can smell the orange.
Yeah, you can smell the orange.
Quite
Right?
strongly,
It's like a very similar to a brioche bread.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic, right? That's something that we do, and obviously mole, tamales, right? I bring some mole that you can try as well. So yeah, I try to be very how I can say it, very Mexican, right? That's what I try to do. Yeah. I try to be real, right? And original about my traditions.
Yeah.
So I try to represent that in the restaurants all the time.
That's wonderful. How does it, for yourself, does it bring you back to your childhood?
Yeah, I love it, right?
Yeah.
And my house is huge. That's why I'm a cook, right? My house is big in food, the food is seen in my family always.
Yes.
So these flavors, this the smell, these kind of things, is fantastic for me, right? Bring me back.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so what's your favorite memory of your childhood then, when it came to this time of year?
Yeah, I think go to the cemetery to see
Yeah.
my grandma, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do it with my family. It's always a good. In Mexico we have always this saying that we always want to be together, right? It's the same in Philippines. You guys always take these times of the year to be together in family, right?
Yeah.
So that's very cool.
It's a really big part of it. And we are asking our callers, our audience, to join us and let us know what were your own childhood Halloween traditions. Did you go trick-or-treating? I didn't, but I sure embraced it when I moved to Canada. Love to hear from you. How do you share those traditions with your children? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone and email us to bctoday@cbc.ca. And before we go to our first caller on the line, let's try some of this bread you have here. This is pan de los muertos.
Pan de los Muertos, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
You can dip it a little bit on the chocolate.
The chocolate.
Yes.
Wow, this looks so. I'm going to smell it too because smell is such a big part of tasting. Oh
It's
my
sweet,
goodness.
right?
It's sweet,
We love sugar.
warm, and comforting. Oh my gosh. Oh wow.
Yeah, it's very good.
It's very chocolatey
Yeah.
and creamy. Oh, that's excellent. So you would bring this and you would eat while you're visiting.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And you put like some for them as well. You leave it overnight, and suppose like the spirits coming.
Oh,
and,
excuse me.
The spirits of the dead coming, and they supposed to get fed and with the smells.
Right.
That's what they.
The smells are absolutely, they're not overwhelming, but they sure just bring you a sense of warmth and comfort. And that's so wonderful. It's great to hear about your traditions. You're bringing them to your restaurant this Thursday. Love to hear from our callers as well. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. What were your own childhood Halloween traditions? What are your best memories growing up and celebrating Halloween? Love to hear from you. I'm eating some bread right now, excuse me. And also let us know if you have kids, how you share those traditions. What are your new traditions with your children come this time of year? I know so much of it is about carving that pumpkin. I'm already trying to get their costumes together and all of that for this Halloween. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Albert called us, that he was on Highway 97 near Falls Creek, and he says he used pillowcases for costumes as a kid, not the fancy costumes kids have today. That's so true, and that's the stereotypical, just put a cloth or a pillowcase over you, a blanket, cut 2 holes, and off you go. You're a ghost. I have to say, when I moved here, have you ever gone trick-or-treating?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I moved when I was like 17 to El Paso, Texas, and I lived for a long time in there.
Yeah.
So it was like fun to do.
Yeah. And what was it like your first time? Because I remember my first time.
Oh, do you know? Oh my God. I remember my first time. My first time was like the pillowcase example.
right.
Yeah, it was a blanket,
True.
there's something in the waist, and I was like a ghost, right?
This is good enough. I'm going to go.
Yeah.
That's right. I think I got a mask from the dollar store and said, this is it. Let's go get candy.
Totally, right?
Our email again is bctoday@cbc.ca. And our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Let's go to our first caller now. If they're ready, is Shell on Highway 1 on the line? Hi, Shell. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I sure can.
Oh, great. So you're joining us on, I guess, pulled over on the highway in the Fraser Valley?
Bet.
Wonderful. Tell me about your memories of Halloween.
Well, so I'm 49 now, and I have Italian heritage, and my mother is Italian, and she really modeled to me how to just use creativity and just go all out and be like that house on the block that is,
right, that one house, yeah.
Where lining up the driveway, there's stuff going on.
That's
there's
right.
like ghosts hanging on the porch. And she just modeled to me the kind of like excitement and the creativity about like handmade. This was in the time in the 80s where, you could she'd have me fill bags of pennies. She'd have me, we'd make popcorn balls and dye them colors and decorate them. So this was like in the era where, you knew your neighbors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But she just really, we'd hang ghosts. And I think it's like the Italian creativity that she modeled to me. She's in her 80s now, but I really feel grateful to my mom for showing me that you could make art and use creativity to make decorations, and
That's
it
so
makes it
wonderful.
festive. Yeah.
I love that.
That's one part of it for sure.
Yeah. Have you continued it?
Absolutely. I was just beginning to tell the story that I also then, as an adult, when I went to graduate school in Maine, that's when I also started being inspired by some of the local communities in New England, in some of the older small towns where people just also go really all out to decorate their houses and be kind of set up little mini, it doesn't even matter if it's a person in, a couple in their late 70s, decorating and doing simple things to make the kids feel, welcome and festive for trick-or-treating time. But I remember the first time coming across a family where they always handed out the full-size candy bars. So so as far as like my mother modeling to me how to like go for it for your, small community, and then also just kind of me living in different parts of the world where different communities really do it. So now I absolutely fall through. Like I've now turned into, not only am I like the full size candy bar house, but I also get a little soda and a bag of chips. And
Wow.
I can't downsize anymore.
You're the house to go to. Shell, I love that, reflecting on what your mom taught you when it comes to creativity. That's so great. Thanks so much for calling in.
Yeah, you betcha. Have a good season.
You too. Thanks for the call. Helen is up next now in North Vancouver. How did you celebrate Halloween, Helen?
Oh, hi. I'm actually originally from Dublin and came here many years ago.
Uh-huh.
And so I would remember, I'm old enough to remember some of the older traditions. So I do remember the fun stuff like bobbing for apples and going out on the streets and that kind of stuff. But I also really clearly, well, it's a little bit different from now in terms of how it's celebrated here, but actually being a little bit scared, like just enough. Like watching maybe a good horror movie, just a little frightened when we were out there because we truly believed in this thin veil between the living and the dead, that spirits could pass through on a Feast of Samhain or All Hallows Eve. So we brought that to the evening. That's something when we were going around as kids, we had this sense of something slightly sinister in the air. And so it had a different sort of flavor to it.
Mm-hmm. A little bit more ominous, yeah.
Yeah, but it was exciting too. And it felt at the end of the night, and I just was saying to your colleague that it would be environmentally very unfriendly in modern times, but we would end the evening with a bonfire on the village green. And
was there significance to that, Helen?
I think it was more just, I don't know if there was sort of a spiritual significance, but it was, and it felt somewhat celebratory and at the same time, again, a little sinister, and we would feel very grown up to be able to stay up that late and out that late and then gather around this big bonfire at the end of the night. And in terms of those, traditions here, raising kids here, I tend to stick to the gory elements of Halloween, even as an adult. If I did a costume, my goal would be to be barely recognizable and a little on the sinister side.
Yeah.
And carried on that tradition with both my own kid and the kids that we shared Halloween with. So,
that's so great.
It was really cool.
That is really cool. Helen, thank you so much. And when you grow up in that kind of culture where there is that, that thin veil, as she says, that thin line, I remember growing up and we'd tell stories and there was always that sense of, could this really be? I mean, is that what you grew up with as well?
Yeah, that's very cool, right? Like something that I really, really enjoy is this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of forests now, and they just tend to take on a little bit more of an eerie aura come Halloween. Amber is next now in Vancouver. What are your favorite memories of Halloween, Amber?
Hi there. So I grew up in the West Kootenays, about an hour outside of Nelson in the 70s, and I have great recollections of my mother trying her hardest to make me costumes that didn't always turn out the best. Elbows on backwards and arms too short and such. And so that was when I was a bit littler. And at that time, we didn't have the finances to purchase costumes. And if you did, they were those really basic, plastic kind of bags with a plastic face mask from, at the time it was Fields or Woolworths or something like that.
Sure.
And then she did have one costume she made for me one year that was a Wonder Woman costume, which I was obsessed with at the time. And I wore it for about 3 weeks straight afterwards to school and everything else. And then she was actually in community theater up there. And so she had quite a trunk of costumes and jewelry and interesting pieces of clothing. And so as I got older, so my friends and I would go over and pick through, and we would always end up dressed as some sort of traveling gypsy or something with all sorts of flowing things.
Performers.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the big letdown for us as kids was that because it was the Kootenays, often at that time of year, we had a bit of snow on the ground. And so we would then we'd come up with these amazing costumes, and then we would have to put on our big clunky boots and our big down coats and cover them all up with all this stuff. But we were well received by the neighbors. There was always quite a long drive. It was very rural. And so whenever we did make the effort to trudge down someone's driveway, we ended up with quite a big pillowcase full of candy at the end of the night.
And do you have kids yourself now?
I do. I have a 12-year-old. I keep wondering when he's going to decide he's done with Halloween, but that does not seem to be anywhere in the near future.
Nice.
He loves the idea of dressing up as scary and ghoulish as he can. And I've been very lucky in that he has decided he wanted it to be pretty much a different version of the same thing every year. So I sewed him, in my mother's tradition, a somewhat cloak, black cloak with a hood. And we just keep adding more lengths to the bottom of it every year.
As he grows up.
As he grows up.
Oh, that's so great.
Scary mask.
That is so cool, Amber. I love that. And, you know, I'm about to make a mermaid costume myself, so I'm hoping it passes muster.
Yep.
Thanks for the call. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to you. It's Amber in Vancouver. And Chef Francisco, why don't we give this mole a try as we close up here? And I'll ask you, you know, what does it mean to you to be able to reflect your traditions so much in your food and in your special events?
Well, I try to share what we really are, right? Like I try to actually share what is Mexico here in Vancouver, right? The idea they used to have about Mexican cuisine, it was a little bit overwhelmed by Tex-Mex cuisine. So, which is the sour cream, Taco Bell, and stuff like that, right? Like, which I'm not a big fan, but we are a little bit more than just tacos and tamales,
so much
right?
more.
Like so much more. So, like everything about or moles or we have so many recipes in Mexico. No, the food, is just huge, right, in my country. So I try to share that with people, right?
Absolutely are. So that's this Thursday at Ophelia. The mole is delicious.
Yeah, the mole is good, right?
Silky and just deep in chocolate.
Over 3 years now. So since I made the first batch, it was 3 years ago, and I treat it like a sourdough. Like so.
Just keep at it.
Yes, I keep at it. I fed them all.
Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
That's Chef Francisco Higuereta, Executive Chef at Ophelia Restaurant in Vancouver. That is it for our show today. And in light of Halloween, we are taking your photos of your best Halloween displays. Email them to us, bctoday@cbc.ca. We would love to see them. At the end of the week, we'll draw for a BC Today prize pack. I can't wait to see your photos of Halloween displays around your neighborhood. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks so much for joining us on YouTube and on the Listen app. Have a great afternoon.